All right, this is Andy Taggart. I'm here with Robert Khayat, a Moss Point native and retired Chancellor at Ole Miss and Moss Point athletic all-star, one of the greats of all time. I'm so glad to get a chance to visit with you, Robert. Thank you so much for hosting me today.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you to the mayor for pursuing this project.
Well, as you know, the Moss Point Sports Hall of Fame is a brand new vision, and part of the vision is to collect oral histories from people who have been important in the history of Moss Point athletics. And you know, I'm not being patronizing by saying you're on that short list.
Well, that's nice. That's a real compliment, because my memory goes back to World War II, when we were sort of stymied, of course, by the war.
Yes.
But we had good athletics for a long time, and many of the athletes I remember are people who played in 46 and 7 and 8 and up into the 50s.
Well, I look forward to visiting with you about some of that as we talk today. You know, one of the things that's been true of Moss Point for a very long time is that sports and athletics have been a real uniting force in the community. Notwithstanding that for the years that you were growing up, we had two different high schools, Moss Point High, which was generally known as Central at the time, and then Magnolia High School, which is where African-American students went to school. And it wasn't until 1970 that we had full desegregation in Moss Point. What is your recollection of the athletics and sports activities of Magnolia High School, even though you didn't go to school there?
Yeah. Oh, my memories are of course, are affected by the passage of time and age. And so I see some things maybe not as clearly as some other people see things. But I do think I vividly remember the significant role of athletics my entire life in Moss Point. And I was born there in 1938. And when I went to school in 1945 at Charlotte High, there was a black school system and there was a Moss Point school system. The black school system, I think, was one building which became ultimately the grammar school for black students before becoming part of the white. It's across the street from where the gymnasium in Magnolia is. It's west of there, on a hill overlooking it. But anyway, so we had black athletics and white athletics. It was all separate. We didn't go to the same schools. We didn't play on the same teams in organized sports. But in not so organized weekend sports, we did play together a lot. And the black kids, in fact, I will use the word black, but they didn't use the word black then. They were colored, or they were Negro, or people of color.
Yes.
Or obscene names, as you could call black people. So I'm going to use black because that's what's currently used. But those black teams were good. They had really good players. And they went to predominantly black colleges like Alcorn and Mississippi Valley and Jackson State, schools in Alabama and Louisiana. But they didn't go to the white.
Right. Regrettably, in those days, even the universities were segregated.
And we were totally segregated. When I came here to Ole Miss in 1956, we were absolutely segregated and had our chins in the wind. We weren't going to integrate, and went through a lot of trouble to get that done. But ultimately, the success is commendable.
Of course.
So I would say that very separate, an awareness of each other and weekend mixing in the afternoons. That story has a little sad tale to it. We would play every Sunday afternoon on a field that we call Miss Span's field, where she kept her cow. It's where Carl Ely School is now. That was a vacant lot all through street to street. And so we played over there. We played with the black kids. And we had great afternoons. But some of the men from town drove around on weekends, and they saw us playing mixed, and they stopped it. They got it stopped. Mr. Towner,
My goodness.
our superintendent, called us in and said, "You can't do that."
My goodness.
We didn't know why. I mean, we thought we were doing fine. No fighting. Everybody's being pretty nice. So playing hard, but still getting along.
Right. Is that field that you're describing where Carl Ely is now located, is that where you played your pickup games from the time you were a boy?
No, that's where we played. We played on the football field first, because it was right there where the tech building is. That building goes west, that was all football field.
All right.
That's where the home games were played.
All
That's
right.
where my first memories of Moss Point athletics start there, of course.
Well, when you were a young boy and just picking up sandlot games or playing in the woods or in the parking lot, how did that come about when you're in your younger age?
Well, at first, of course, we just played whatever vacant space there was in the neighborhood. The streets, let me get this in perspective. The streets weren't paved. We didn't pave Chancellor and Bellevue until up in World War II.
Hmm.
So when I first came up, everything was an unpaved path. Our street, Beersley Street, was one lane, had a big oak tree in the middle of it, where, thank goodness, the mayor later built a house on that street, looking at the oak tree, and he had that tree taken down. Shame for the tree, but really helped transportation. And so now the whole street's developed, of course. But we played wherever we could find an open space. We played at the high school on that, when we could get on a football field, we did. We couldn't go on there with black kids, and so we didn't do that. So we would usually go to the high school field on Saturday morning and look for money under the stadium. Never found much, but we went, and then we'd play a game or pick up ball. We had a basketball goal over at Joe Schaub's house, Schaub, and that was over on Magnolia Street between Bellevue and Chancellor.
All right.
That's where that was, and so that's where you go play basketball. But there were only 4 or 5 of us. We scattered out all over the county, and really didn't come to appreciate that until we were in junior high school. That's when the 8th grade kids started coming.
Mm-hmm.
And also we had students from Creole, from Orange Grove, from Escataway, from Hurley, I think from Harleston, I'm pretty sure, from East Moss Point, we're in Creole, and then where we lived on the west side of the bayou, it divides Moss Point into two areas. And then the town just sort of grew in the 40s and 50s, and some subdivisions were built, and you came to town and things came along.
Besides Joe Schaub, do you remember some of the names of your young friends in those days?
Oh, yeah, sure, I do. Joe Schaub was one. Alton Ogburn was one. His daddy worked for the school. Mike Bryan was one. He was married to Dixie Bryan, by the way, who taught for years at Baltimore School. Let me think about this. Several of them have died, like Judge Sonny Mills, Robert Mills was one of my childhood friends. A boy named Edward Raspberry. Bert Lynn was one of my friends. Of course, Larry Wood and our lifelong friends, we stayed in touch. Larry just died during the COVID problem. But those friendships remain. And we were friends with the girls. Joanne Eklund Van, the gazebo lady.
Right.
She's been a great friend to all of us, all of our lives. And then Dixie was married to Mike, and then Larry married a girl named Sue Sims, who still lives in Moss Point. And Bert married a girl from Creole. And so I was the only one who married outside the town, I think, maybe.
Your first memories of organized sports before you got to high school, whether it's Little League or Pee Wee football, what do you remember about that?
Well, the first organized sports I remember is that some group, like the Young Men's Business Club, organized a slow-pitch softball league, and we had 4 teams in it. And they were sponsored by merchants. And so there were the team I played for was R&K store, that was Ramos Khayat store, and Miss Bill's restaurant. So we were R&K Miss Bill's. And I think I was 8, very young. And then there was a Woods and Burnham Drug, that was a team. And then it was Rate Drugstore and somebody else sponsors each team.
Yes.
And we played our games on the field, which is where Foster Lennox Hardware is now located, next to the river.
Yes.
And that whole area up to where the older building is up on the hill, on Main, I guess, the Highway Street, I guess Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
All that was open for baseball. And so we had a slow pitch league, and we played about 4 or 5 games, 6 games. Didn't go to championships or anything like that. But that grew. And we had some volunteer men who would come do the umpiring, and we had somebody from the city who did the lining of the field and put the bases out. And over time, it was a nice little field. And it became the Little League baseball field.
Well, when I was a young boy, those fields were still there, had not yet moved over to Bellevue where they are now.
And I wrote a little thing about something that happened to me on that field. I think I was 7 or 8. I said 8 earlier, but maybe it's 7. Anyway, I went down there to meet the boys and play down there. And I was wearing short khaki pants and a t-shirt, and I was barefooted. And I didn't have on any underwear because I didn't like to wear underwear. My mother didn't know that, but I didn't. Anyway, I'm the catcher. My daddy had told me, if you want to play, learn how to be a catcher. So I did. I learned how to catch. So I lined up to catch. And we got 10 people in the bleachers behind us. And I squat down, and of course my pants just ripped from can to can. And there I sit with my little white behind, shouting at the massive crowd. I think I'm the only one who knew it happened, but anyhow, I just burned in my memory.
Well, I guess it would be, and thank you for sharing that story with us.
So that's one, but I remember how on 4th of July we had an all-day celebration at that same place.
Yes.
We had boat races right there at the river.
I remember the boat races.
They were just wonderful. We lived for those. And then we played a game the day before, but the men played a game the next day. And they lined that field off so that men could play it and hit long balls. And the question was whether anybody would hit one up into the easy, what was the name of that? There was a feed store up there.
That's right, for many, many years.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm thinking Mr. Rag Spin might have owned it. I don't know that, but I thought that. Anyway, could anybody hit the ball up there? And
Yes.
I could. I was right-handed. But I don't remember everybody ever doing that. But they were hot shot games.
Do you remember, Robert, when you first started playing hardball?
I do remember.
How old were you?
I was 12 and was eligible to go out for the American Legion team, which played in Pascagoula. And early in my life, my dad had been a coach. So we started talking about playing football and baseball. He said, well, I'm going to teach you something if you want to learn it. He said, if you really want to get to play in football, you learn how to place kick. And I'll show you how to place kick. And if you really want to play in baseball, you play catcher. Because nobody wants to be a catcher. I said, I'll volunteer. So I learned to place kick starting in 7th grade. I wasn't very good then, but I did learn. And I really learned how to catch. And I became a pretty good catcher along the way. But when I was 7th grade, I guess would I have been 12 by then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, then that would have been my first organized baseball. And we played like a half a dozen games in Pascagoula. And they sent one of those panel trucks around to get us. And there'd be 4 or 5 of us. And we get to ride to Pascagoula and play on that old field at the Pascagoula Rec Center back there east of the center. And Mr. Davenport was a welder at Walker Shipyards, and he coached us. And he was a really good coach, and spent a lot of time with us. And I played ball with those boys all the way through into college.
Well, when you were a young boy, can you say which was your favorite, baseball or football?
Baseball was always my favorite. I saw the Pride of the Yankees movie about Lou Gehrig, and then I saw the Babe Ruth story, and I was going to be a Yankee. And then one other thing happened that had to do with that. When I was 1940. I'm trying to get this right. I was 13, Yeah, I was born in 1938. I was 13. So 1951, had our only family vacation. We bought our first family car. We never had a car, and the daddy and my mother loaded 4 kids in that unair conditioned Chevrolet, and it really was a Chevrolet. And we drove to New York City.
Oh my
And
goodness.
we stopped in Atlanta and Washington and Atlantic City and Philadelphia. Did all the historical things. To a 2-week trip. My mother was really brave to do that. But anyway, so we did that, and we got to New York, and we had tickets to Yankee Stadium. And Mickey Mantle was a rookie.
Oh my goodness.
Joe, how could it have been better? So we go to Yankee Stadium, and there it is. And I think, I'm going to play in Yankee Stadium. Of course, I wasn't telling anybody that, but I was thinking it. And our daddy told my brother Eddie and me, I'm going to come see both of y'all play in Yankee Stadium. Well, Eddie just said some cuss word or something and said he wouldn't believe it. Because he wasn't going to be playing baseball then, but he was, but not the way I did. But anyway, when I was 22, I'm kicking off in Yankee Stadium. The Redskins were playing the Giants.
You did play in Yankee Stadium.
Eddie played.
Just not the sport you thought.
And Eddie played for the Eagles.
Outstanding.
Yeah, that's a good story.
That's a very good story.
True story.
Well, your daddy gave you good advice about learning to be a place kicker. That turned out to.
I was always on a team, and I was always started, and I always got to play. So, yeah, and I would say that being a kicker involves a lot more than just being a kicker. I mean, that's a pressure-filled job. These boys today are a whole lot better, and girls too, a lot better than I was. But I'll tell you, I felt a lot of pressure to be successful because I felt like they were counting on me to make that point or those 3 points. So it was with me all my life, but it certainly paved the way for me.
Well, it was. You were hugely successful, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. When did you feel as though you were first being recruited to play college ball?
When I was a junior in high school, the people from Auburn and Mississippi State and LSU and Tulane came to see me play. Well, that's what they said.
That's pretty good batch there.
Eddie was playing at Tulane, so that was kind of natural. But the others certainly came, and then I had a letter from Paul Dietzler when I was a junior, and it had an LSU ballpoint pen in the letter, and he told me how much they want me to come to Ole Miss. To LSU, and he'd like me to make a campus visit. So they were playing Georgia Tech one night, and I was invited to that, and I went. And my dad and Nicky Hill, who's deceased now, Bert Hill's father, I think, the Bert Hill who works at the country club.
All right.
I think that Nicky was his dad. I think Bert was the baby. I think. Anyway, Nicky would drive my daddy where he wanted to go, and we'd go with him. So we rode over to Baton Rouge and saw Georgia Tech and LSU play at night. And I mean, the stands were full. It was a thrill, and it was just fight, hold that tiger, hold that tiger.
Yes, it's a huge event for sure.
Woo, I would have gone to LSU. If Coach Diesel could have signed us that night, I would have signed. But then about 3 weeks later, I go to Ole Miss as a guest. And I stay in what is now the computer center building, old. It was in the student union, it had some bedrooms in it. And so 6 of us stayed up there. And including me was Billy Cannon.
Wow.
So it turned out to be a kind of a precursor.
What an interesting irony. Ole Miss was recruiting Billy Cannon and LSU was recruiting you.
Yes, but they were recruiting Billy Cannon too.
Sure.
And they were modestly recruiting me, but they did. Barney Capoon, who was an Ole Miss graduate, was the scout, the talent scout for LSU. So he came to Walls Point, came to our old gymnasium, and where we had our clothes hanging on a rack. You remember the racks? Anyway, those clothes there. He takes his coat off, and when he puts it on the rack, it drapes all the way to the floor. He wears like a size 54 extra long, you know. Anyway, so I was recruited by those schools and chose to go to Ole Miss.
Now, were they actively recruiting you as a kicker, or were you also a position player at the time?
play. I was a high school end and fullback and part-time quarterback, but I was going to play in the line at Ole Miss. I didn't know that, but they did. And I could place kick. I mean, I did know how to place kick, so that helped a lot. Yes. And it's just a wonderful experience. So I guess I don't want to drift too much here, but to answer your question, I think that my junior year when I visited those schools, and when Dixie Howell came to be our coach when I was in 10th grade, I knew I was going to do business. We were going to do business because he put in put the Ole Miss offense in, same numbering system. We built a sled one summer. I'll talk about that if I need to, but I want to. You want me to? But we built a blocking sled, weighed 1 million pounds. Anyway, he instilled in us a belief that we could be winners. Moss Point had lost every game my brother's senior year, and I was in 9th grade, and they lost every game.
Did 9th graders play varsity ball in those days?
Oh yeah, they could. I hardly ever did. The coach Stormstreet invited me to come out and practice and play in the Pascagoula game, and he gave me 4 plays because I could pass. And he said, we're going to have Robert run right and Robert pass right, and Robert run left and Robert pass left. And so my brother gets his jaw broken. I mean, had a freak accident, breaks his jaw.
Was he playing quarterback?
He was. We were sort of utility because if Gene Wood wasn't available, or Larry Wood wasn't, Terry Monk, Ralph Jones, there were a group of guys who could play quarterback, but a lot of folks were hurt, always. Anyway, we both played. Eddie played end and quarterback, and I played end and fullback and quarterback. And we, of course, played both ways. I went to Pascagoula and played in that season-ending game, threw 4 passes, completed 3.
Well, there you go. 75% completion rate's not too bad.
Yeah. Anyway, that was interesting.
Did you ever play on a team that your dad coached?
No, not my dad. But I played on a team with Eddie, with the Redskins. He got traded down to the Redskins. I say down because Philadelphia, not because of standing.
Geographically down.
Geographically. He got traded, and so we were on the same team together 1 year.
That has to have been a great experience for you.
Yeah.
Were you recruited at the college level to play baseball, or were there even baseball scholarships in those days?
Well, there were, but Coach Swayze was a football scout too, so he would get football players who could play baseball. So on my championship, we won 2 SEC championships, by the way. And speaking of race, we didn't get to play in the World Series because there was somebody in Jackson, board of trustees or somebody, who thought it was dangerous for us to possibly play against a black person. Well, I mean, we won 23 games and lost 2.
My word.
We would have done all right. I think we would have done all right. But I played 4 years at Ole Miss. Now, as a freshman, I couldn't play, but sophomore, and I was a catcher all 4 years. I mean, all 3 years.
Well, you were all SAC a couple of times, as I recall.
I was twice. I did fine with that. I had a good batting average. I couldn't throw very well, but I was scouted by several teams, and the Chicago Cubs actually told me they'd like to sign me to a contract. And I got to thinking about Eddie's playing for the Redskins, and he's in big leagues, and then he's out. Oh, he's in. I go to the Cubs, and I go to Florida. I get on a yellow school bus. I start playing 6 nights a week, making $50 a week. I don't think I couldn't comprehend doing that.
It's really amazing that you thought that through, because it was a grueling lifestyle for sure in the minors.
Yeah, you know who I learned it from? You know J.D. Westfall?
Yes, sure.
J.D. Westfall played in that league.
I did not know that.
They called the Florida League.
Mm-hmm.
The Florida
Grapefruit League, yes.
Like that. Anyway, I knew that he was playing there, so I listened around and heard stories about what it was like.
Besides sort of your dreams of getting to play in Yankee Stadium, do you have a recollection of a time when you thought you really might be good enough to go pro?
Every year, the pro scouts would come to our practice sessions at Ole Miss. And they'd get out there early enough to watch the pre-practice activities, and which were part and part kicking, throwing passes and routes. So anyway, that's before the linemen would come out. But they would be there, and several times I had scouts come down and say, you know, this is goodness gracious, boy, you can really kick. You know, we want you to come. So I get to rock it along, and I get this letter from Paul Brown. Lou Groza is the world's best place kicker at the time. And I get this letter from Paul Brown saying that the Cleveland Browns would like to have me, and that they were going to draft me, and that if they got me, they were going to send Lou Groza to sign me up.
Wow.
Well, that's jingle bells.
Of
sound
course.
Walking in the door, you know. So anyway, it worked out. I had a good career. I missed one really important kick, but mostly I had a good career, and learned a lot doing it, and got drafted by Cleveland and signed a contract with Cleveland. And then before the season started, Groza decided not to retire, and so they traded Francis O'Brien, a tackle, and me to Washington for Sam Baker, who was a place kicker and a punter, so he could cover both kicks. But Groza was the king.
Well, among other results of that is you got to play with your brother for a year at Washington, right?
That's right. And he was with the Eagles when I played. So my first year with the Redskins, we won one game, tied 2, lost 9. His team won the NFL championship and beat Green Bay in the Pro Bowl in a playoff game.
Now, am I correct that you were named to the Pro Bowl after your rookie year?
I was.
Was that as a kicker?
Yeah, yeah, only as a kicker. And the coach of Buck Shaw, who was Eddie's coach in Philadelphia, and he brought with him Bobby Walton, who was their place kicker. And Bobby could kick short kicks, but Coach Shaw, trying to be fair, let Bobby kick the extra points and the short field goal. And I got to kick the one long field goal, 50-something yards. I did not make it. I mean, 53 yards was a long way.
Do you have a recollection of your longest field goal?
Yeah, absolutely. Playing in Baltimore, and we had a good rivalry. They always beat us because that's when they were great. But we call a field goal. I go in the game, and the ball's going to be placed on the 50-yard line. And if the goalpost was on the goal line, of course.
Y'all, okay, at that time the goalpost was on the goal line.
So it'd be a 50-yard kick. And I made it.
Well, then.
It set a Redskin record. I like a fainted.
A 50-yard field goal is still a big deal.
Well, 56, at that time, 56. Bert Retchershaw had kicked on it, 56 yards. So it was a long kick. I mean, now 60s come into play. I don't know what they do differently. I know how to kick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to do that. I know how they do it. But somehow they get a lot more juice on it.
It's become such a science.
You know, they kick it off now. They kick it out of that back of the end zone from the 35-yard line. Right. We kicked from the 40, and we got it to the goal line. That was good. And he's trying to kick it high. They don't really try to kick it so high.
Right.
Because they know they can kick it out of the end zone.
Let me back up to Moss Point again, Robert. Female athletes didn't really get their due in America for many, many years until fairly recently in our nation's history. But do you have any recollection of female sports in Moss Point and maybe some great female athletes that you recall?
I have a few I can remember. Both of those. We were playing female sports, I think, all through World War II. Because I remember it from 46, 7, and 8, 1950. There was a time when we had really good women's basketball and women's track. And so the women played half court. I remember that. They could guard on one end and shoot on the other end. Strange game, but they could play. And so we had really good teams for those years, 46, 7, 8, maybe even 50. But the players really came from Orange Grove and Creole and Escataway and Hurley and East Moss Point. And those women could play basketball. So the one family that really impacted women's sports was the Lundy family, Lundy. Bobby Lundy was their star. She was a guard. They had a sister who was older, who played center, who was real good, and they had a younger daughter who I don't remember playing, but I'm sure she could play. Uh, who they called Doodle, 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 and she was knockout looking too, by the way. But they had a good women's team. They played good basketball. And then I didn't see the track meets. We didn't have a track. So they ran on a football field. In those days, that football field was right there between the gym and Bellevue. It ran east and west. And so it was easy to watch practice and to play pickup games and that sort of thing. But yeah, I remember that pretty vividly. Now some of them, I don't, that's as far as I can go. I don't remember other women's sports. I know some of the women, a few, knew how to play tennis. And one of the things my dad did when he was supervisor was to go into places like the YMBC and on a parking lot lay out a tennis court and put tennis nets up and paint it. And he said he could use the county money to do that even though it was on privately owned property. Because it was a public service.
Yes.
It was. I mean,
Yes.
there were several of them in town.
Did Moss Point play in a high school conference in those days?
We were in the Big Eight. When I got to high school, we were in the Big Eight. And we were really way too small to be in the Big Eight. We were playing Jackson Central.
Really?
Yeah, we played them twice. While I was a teenager, a junior high kid. And they beat us 64-0 and 67-13.
Ouch.
But there's a wonderful, somewhat off-color story about it. You want to hear that?
Of course I do.
All right, so we're playing them, and Dawes Fulton was the coach. He's kind of a legendary in Jackson. They ran a single wing, and they sent out 8 or 10 SEC players a year. You know, Billy Yelverton, Tommy Lee, just a whole bunch of them. So anyway, John Gainey, who I went to Ole Miss with, let's see how we played in Jackson. I went up there as a kind of a manager because I was in 7th or 8th grade. So I rode the bus up. I got water for all that stuff. So anyway, they have us 64-0, and there are 2 minutes to go in the game. And they have now, at the end of their 5th string, they've changed uniforms.
Good night.
They're not even the same uniforms as the varsity. So we played 4 teams, and then here's the 5th team. And we had a big old boy named Ted Prevost, who was overweight and redheaded and freckle-faced and funny as he could be. And so he's out there and scored 64-0. And they've got these 10th graders playing for Jackson. They get to play. They don't ever get to play. They come out and this tackle comes up and strutting up there, you know. And Ted, I'm going to just say what he said. You can cut it if you want to. Ted says, you cocky son of bitches think y'all got us beat, don't you? 64.
That's outstanding.
That's pretty good. Son of bitches.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, they did have us beat, by the way. That's the only 2 times we played them. But we played Nichols High School in New Orleans. I didn't, but the teams ahead of me did. But we played the Big Eight. We played.
Who were your big rivals in those days?
We wanted Pascagoula to be, but we weren't allowed to play them until like 53.
Really?
There'd been big fights at the games back during the war.
My goodness.
They had fights. That was kind of commonplace. Excuse me, to have a fight at the football game, but the players fought. So we couldn't play. Then we started playing, and we played there and played at Moss Point. And I think for the first couple of years we may have split, but after that they pretty well dominated us. Our coaching was turning over, and we were just not. We weren't doing what we needed to do. But I remember Pascagoula's 1947 team won the SEC championship.
Well then.
Yeah. You remember Teddy Millette?
Sure.
Well, he was from Greenville, and he played in the Big Eight. And I'm trying to think about who else is. Paul Ryan was from Pascagoula, and he played on that team in that era. Robert Earl Elam was real young then, but he was a good player. When he was in seventh grade, he was a good player.
Really?
So that's pretty much.
Let me bring you all the way up to today.
Okay.
Maybe one of the most game-changing phenomena in college sports today is the NIL contract phenomenon and the transfer portal. I appreciate those are two different issues, but they're related. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I don't make anything of it because I don't know. I don't. Nobody's ever really explained it to me. You apparently do understand what's going on. I did read a quote from the Ole Miss coach, Lane Kiffin, who said now, when they passed that, now the NCAA has legalized cheating. That was his comment about it. Pretty cynical. But anyway, it may be, I don't know. But I hear these tales about how much money is being given, and they somehow found a way to channel the money so that it doesn't go all to you, or all to me, or various. It goes into some account, and then it can be dispersed by the agents. I don't know.
Well, you spent some time as president at the NCAA Foundation.
I did.
Do I recall correctly?
Yeah.
And of course, the whole premise of the NCAA, at least for my lifetime until 2 years ago, was to keep money out of college athletics.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it seems to me that the decision may have been one that had to be made, because we do have in this country some law that says you can't discriminate on the basis of age or wealth or whatever. But I don't know how you control giving when it's voluntary and is earmarked transitionally, which is the way it seems to me. The story you hear often is the Alabama quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I hear.
Mm-hmm.
And that he's already been given, money has been sent in honoring him at the level of $500,000 to $1 million, $500,000 to $1 million, and that his money can be passed on to him as he wants it. I don't know if that's true or not. That sounds, I can't believe that, but that's what I heard. I don't mean to be flippant.
No, that's fine.
Have an opinion.
That's fine.
I don't know how. I don't know how you manage that.
Well, not many people will just be honest and say, I don't know. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Let me ask you to touch on one final thing.
Sure.
As you know, historically, some folks have suggested that a student has to decide to be a good student or a good athlete, but can't really be both. And of course, you succeeded at very high levels, both in academia and in athletics. And what advice would you give to young men and women in Moss Point who are struggling with that challenge?
I think that somehow you have to, someone they respect has to connect with them to help them understand that you really do have more than two lives, but you surely have two lives. One is your academic life, well, let's say three: personal life, academic life, and athletics life. Athletics is going to be where the excitement is for most people, and the adulation and success and opportunities and so forth. But athletics is time sensitive. It's going to end. You are going to reach the age. Tom Brady doesn't seem like he's going to reach the age, but most people reach the age about 30. If they stay till they're 30, they've been around a long time. And baseball, you can stay a little longer. But this is going to end, and you may or may not be a coach, and you may or may not have a job, and so you better have an education. Whatever that turns out to be, it may not be a PhD. It may be a degree from a community college that teaches you how to fix automobile motors or electric motors or whatever. But it needs to be some sort of marketable skill, and that includes reading and writing and arithmetic for sure. And that includes computer technology and other high-tech uses that are available to us, which were never available before. In fact, when I saw my first computer, I thought, I'm not even going to try to do that. Well, I couldn't get along very well with that now.
Right.
So I think the best lesson is try to lead a balanced life. Try to have your spiritual life, your personal life, your academic life, your your sports life. And if there are other lives, so you can add those on, but those are sort of central. I've never laid that out before, but I really do think that's right.
Well, let me tell you, I can't express to you how grateful I am personally, and all of us in Moss Point are, for the credit that you've reflected on our hometown for so many years, for your graciousness and kindness, and particularly for your time today. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you. I do thank you. I'm afraid I digressed too much.
Look, I really wanted the conversational tone, so and that's all we got.
Okay,
Well, do you want to
I'd like
read?
to put this in there.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
All right, so I think most, I shouldn't say that, I, and I'm sure many others, have struggled with this transition in race relations and all of the noise and anger, and there's a negative impact, but also the positive. As they look around, there's some real positive gains have been made with regard to trying to accommodate two very different races with a lot of common background. Somebody told me that the reason black people, some black people, refer to the woman who runs the house where the person works as honky. Do you know why that is? Because the kids would say, when the white lady would drive up in front of the house and honk the horn, the kids would say, "Honky's here." I've
never heard that.
That's a pretty good little story. Anyway, that may not be true, but it plays well. But I think once 1956 came, actually 51 probably, I've got something in this book about that. But once we began the effort to integrate and to treat people with respect and dignity and opportunity and all kindness, all positive values we know, I, and I'm sure other people too, have struggled with the fact that we have evidence, the remnants of the slavery. Even in 2022, there's still remnants of it. There are people who think of being superior or inferior, or capable or incapable. And so I've been reading Wendell Berry. And if you haven't read Wendell Berry, I hope you will try it. He just really writes wonderfully. For me, he summed up that feeling that I think I have, and I know lots of black people have. And he's writing about a farm hand, and he was black. And this little boy is 11 years old, and he hangs out with Dick all day, every day on the farm. And Dick very quietly teaches him how to do chores, like chop wood, or mend the fence, or how to drive mules. He teaches him the basic knowledge he has to have. And he's trying, in his 11-year age group brain, he's trying to get a feel for how Dick feels. And he says, Dick was Grandpa's hired hand, who belonged, as Andy knew, to the race once enslaved and still subservient in that country, but who in Andy's consciousness had emerged from his race and place completely as himself. I just think that so beautifully summarizes that bifurcated existence where you're black for some reasons, you're not black for some other reason. That's got to be an awkward place. It's awkward for white people.
Of course.
They just don't. You don't ever want to appear to be insensitive to the. You don't ever want to appear to be not sensitive to the emotional feelings, You don't want to be non-sensitive. I'm trying to say this better. You don't. Is it insensitive or not?
Insensitive.
Okay. You don't want to be insensitive to the internal feelings of another person, and particularly when the lines are drawn so clearly between black and white, you really have to be careful. And so it seems to me that what he says here about that he had emerged from that history of slavery and really deferential treatment to being completely himself. That just seems like a great line.
Well, it is, and it's a great way to sum up our conversation because, in a very real way, the world of athletics is sort of the great meritocracy. The best players play. And that's one reason it has always been a great unifier in communities, even communities that otherwise have racial challenges.
Yeah.
Athletics can be the great unifier because it's the great meritocracy.
Yeah, I probably always, I don't want to be too open about that, I guess, but I really ought to say something about the leadership of the mayor.
Please. Please.
Okay, it was my good fortune during the last 2 years to get to know the mayor of Moss Point, a man I'm sure people who watch this probably know, and I am such an admirer of him. I think he's put his finger right where it ought to be on enhancing Moss Point's image, because Moss Point, when we grew up, although the racial situation wasn't right, we knew it wasn't right. We didn't know what was wrong with it, because that's just the way it was. But we knew it wasn't right, and we weren't going to live with it, and we haven't lived with it, and we're still trying to make it through this transition period, and it requires a lot of patience and a lot of caring and a lot of openness and kindness. I would say the fruits of the Spirit would really come into play here.
That's a sweet way to say it, and Mayor Billy Knight certainly demonstrates that.
Billy Knight certainly does. And I've been so impressed by him and so appreciative of his leadership and Andy's leadership and Steve's leadership and the whole group who's rallied around. Flies Cecilo with her help. It's just a wonderful thing to see happening, and I hope I can be helpful.
Well, you already have been very helpful. Thank you so much.